Hey folks, Troy Dooley, the Beachside CEO. Hope you guys are having a great time. I've been on the road, it seems like, for the last 2 or 3 weeks. Spoke at the Direct Selling Edge conference up in Franklin, Tennessee, and I've lost my voice a little bit. And then went to Salt Lake City and spoke up there. I had a great time. I got to invest some time with a brand new team that's launching a company in March. And then I got to invest some time interviewing one of my mentors who wrote the book, The 7 Pillars of Inflection, and he runs a direct selling company. But what's so unique is he's also a professor and has been for many, many years, helped so many people in business. And as I studied what he had written in his book and I've applied it into my own life and shared it with clients, I have finally had the opportunity to interview him. But something that has been common with everything is people asking me, Troy, can you separate business ethics from personal ethics? And I pondered that many, many years ago and literally tried to do that myself and found out that you can't. I've fallen short many times since then, but the one thing that comes true or holds true in my life is that I know where my benchmark is. I know where my plumb line is, if you will. So when I get outside of that, there's a stirring inside where I know I've got to get back into pointed north, if you will. Get back straight lined into where I'm going. And as I've studied it, and I've studied many different people on ethics, I found out that you either have ethics or you don't. There's no way that you can separate business ethics from personal ethics. When you make a promise to a person, they expect you to abide by that promise. I've had some situations come up this year in business where people that have hired our company to help them in credibility pieces, to help them in their startup phases, to come in and act as interim CEO at times as they were going through a financial shift and a change and sometimes a sale. They decide they don't want to abide by the covenants, the agreement in which they'd signed. And it has never failed. The one common denominator of it all is they don't want to take responsibility for a lack of communication. See, usually what happens in any type of ethical situation is there's a breakdown in communication. One side or the other stops communicating. And then they use that to say, well, you haven't fulfilled on your end. You haven't helped us like we thought you would. Sometimes they'll say, well, right here in the agreement. And we'll say, well, right there in the agreement, we did exactly what we said we would. And I pondered that because people say, well, Troy, you say you don't like lawsuits. And it's like, well, that's true, but I never said I wouldn't sue somebody. So I believe that when it comes down to ethics, it's still that old-fashioned rule of thumb. When you give a person your word and you sign an agreement, it's just like if you were shaking hands. See, that's the key in life. And so many times, I think we miss that. And I think one of the reasons that we miss it is that sometimes we launch companies or we get into projects that we want to do and we miss the mark. We don't have a real purpose. We say, well, it's about the money. Well, money is a result of something. So you've got to have something that goes deeper. When I look at companies that have launched from the garages or the kitchen tables and they went on to become iconic companies where you don't even have to have the writing of the name, you just know who they are. It's because they impacted people at the heart level and the founders stood true to their word. Don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean that the founders were perfect. Not in any case. Every case of an iconic company, there was a stage that they went through where they faltered. I can remember a few years ago the iconic company Harley-Davidson fell into the hands of a Japanese ownership, same company that made bowling pins. And they thought they could change the way the motorcycle was, and that didn't work out for them very well. Sales plummeted, and finally management was able to buy that company back, put it back to its roots. People, hundreds of thousands of people will travel to South Florida, to Sturgis, across the country. Some of them are founders, CEO, millionaires, billionaires sometimes. Some of them are just regular, everyday outlaw bikers, and they all come together because that company has been built around freedom and independence. And they draw that common denominator. When you look at other great companies like Starbucks, if you just see the mermaid, you think of what they are. Howard Schultz took a trip to Italy and came back and said if we could just create the same atmosphere. See, he wanted to create a third place in somebody's life. We'd lost Main Street. We'd all kind of been urbanized, and you go to work and you come home. Some people would go to church, but it used to be Main Street was kind of that place. Well, before too long, we were willing to spend $5 for coffee when just a generation ago it was 50 cents. Think about the iconic companies that you know of. I think of Amway. Here is a company that was started as the California Perfume Company and wanted to give women the opportunity not just to look pretty, not just to look good, but to earn a little bit of income along the way. And over the years, it's become known as a brand that just the name Avon, because that's their emblem, that's their logo, it says everything that you need to know. They help so many women worldwide. When we go through and we look at companies like that, we start to realize that they constantly communicate when it's good, when it's bad. When Microsoft a few years ago were so big and people started coming after them, and even the government, they didn't try to hide that. They just went full bore and said, here's where we stand on it. They lost, but it was not because they didn't fight. And you know what? Here's the funny thing. They're still not much smaller than they were then, and it's because they constantly communicated along the way. Look at Apple. Apple's a prime example of an iconic company that created a shift in the world. You say, Troy, you're bringing up these companies. Well, I am, because every one of them have had their own ethical issues along the way, but they didn't hide them. They didn't cover them up. They shared, hey, we've faltered. We had a problem. And because of that, they won back the trust. I've had a lot of situations that I've covered this last year in direct selling. And some of them, as I watched, I realized, not only did the companies launch for the wrong reasons, but they, in some cases, launched and got away from their purpose, got away from what they were there for, got away from where they should be going. And I think that today we're at a pinnacle moment in the direct selling industry. Richard Brooks a few years ago had stated, united we stand, divided we fall. And I've studied that mantra. I've listened to his speech over and over and over. I've read his transcript over and over and over, and it's so meaningful. It's one of those evergreen things that just never goes away. But then I realized that not everybody has Richard's ethics. I look at companies that I've had the privilege of sitting and listening as they shared their dream of launching, and I've gone back and I've listened to audios and videos that we recorded. And sometimes the facts that were said early on, we find out that that's not the truth. That it was hyped, that it was to try to make the companies look better than that they were, and you cannot live that way. So when a company starts off on the wrong foot, it's hard to build that core relationship with the distributors, because eventually the facade will break down. And when that facade breaks down and the truth starts to show, and you've not built trust on the right foundation from the very beginning, then companies fail. They don't get to become that iconic brand. I mentioned Starbucks. When Howard Schultz left the company around the turn of the century, the company started to falter. They forgot about the core values in which they were built on. Howard had always said, the end user is our number one asset. If we will take care of the end user, then we will grow. We will add shareholder value. And he said, for us to do that, we have to take care of our baristas, all of our team members, all of our employees. We've got to make them feel like this is family and this is home, because if we will do that, they, the frontline warriors, will take care of the end user. Everything went great, but then the company started looking at just the profits, just the shareholder value. all of a sudden stores were closed and the company lost its culture, its feeling, and Howard came back in and righted the ship because he said, you know what? It all goes back to what I originally started the company on. Wrote a book about it called Onward. It's a great book. I recommend that you get it. Every great direct selling company is the same way. I'll be in Dallas in April at the direct selling news event where they celebrate the top 100 companies. And last year as I was there listening to some of these CEOs talk, what was amazing to me is they all had one common thing. They launched with a purpose, and they constantly communicated with their field force. They didn't blow smoke. They told the truth. I'm going to tell you right now, you want your company to have a chance to become an iconic brand. If you want your team in the field to become a large, successful team, then you need to constantly communicate with your team. I'm not talking about being negative and all that crap, but when a challenge hits your team, don't you blow smoke. Face it, share with them with confidence how you're going to get through it, and together move through to the other side, because if you don't, then that little bit of trust that you may have gathered will be broken. And the next thing you know, that dream that you had as a CEO or a leader in the field will disappear, and people will stop trusting you. Folks, live life like it's an epic adventure. Stay dangerous, stay strong, and if you're in network marketing, act like it.